In the soft glow of the snow-dusted park, where the faint strains of holiday carols mingled with children's laughter, Kathy Bennett, a polished CEO with a fortune to her name, paused mid-step. A small voice, fragile yet bold, broke through her reverie. "I don't have a mama. Can I spend the day with you, ma'am?" Kathy looked down to find a girl barely 3 wrapped in a faded red coat, clutching a tattered teddy bear. Snowflakes clung to the child's lashes, her brown eyes wide with a quiet plea. Kathy's gaze flickered, scanning the park, until it settled on a man standing a short distance away. His worn coat and snow-crusted boots spoke of hardship, but his steady, watchful presence radiated care. Their eyes locked briefly. His held a warmth that felt like a hearth in the cold. Kathy knelt slightly, her usual boardroom poise giving way to something softer. "What's your name, little one?" "Lena." "Came," the shy reply, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to know what it's like to hold a mama's hand, just for today." The words landed like a stone in still water rippling through Kathy's guarded heart. She hesitated, then offered her gloved hand a gesture that felt both foreign and right. "It's Christmas," she murmured almost to herself. "Maybe we all need a little warmth today." Lena's face glowed as her tiny hand found Kathy's fitting as if it were meant to be. The man approached his steps, careful, his face etched with fatigue, but softened by love for the girl. "She's not usually so forward," he said, brushing snow from Lena's hood. But today, she needed to try. Kathy nodded, a lump rising in her throat. "She's brave. So's her dad," she said, meeting his eyes. He offered a faint smile. No explanations, no apologies, just quiet acceptance of the moment. The park hummed around them. Kids in bright jackets raced by parents, tugged sleds through the snow, and a brass band played "O Holy Night" near the twinkling pines. Kathy, in her pristine cream coat and recently swapped snow boots, was a vision of success, her golden hair perfect, her name a fixture in glossy magazines. Yet beneath the polish, she felt fragile like ice about to crack. In her bag, tucked beneath a silk scarf, was a Christmas card from her board, formal, impersonal, a sterile nod to another year of triumphs. But here, in this fleeting moment, a child's trust felt like the first real connection she'd known in years. "Would you both like to walk with me for a while?" Kathy asked, her voice tentative. Lena's eager nod was instant, and the man Charles studied her for a moment before his lips curved faintly. "She'd love that," he said. And so they walked, an unlikely trio, a wealthy executive, a man carrying the scent of wood and winter, and a girl with patched mittens and a heart brighter than the holiday lights. In that shared stroll amidst the snow and carols, they found something fragile and unspoken, a chance to mend, if only for a day. The snow crunched softly beneath Kathy's boots as she walked slowly through the park, Lena's tiny hand wrapped in hers. The little girls swung their joined arms with glee, her red coat a bright dot of joy against the white canvas of winter. Charles followed behind at a respectful distance, not too close to intrude, but never too far to stop watching. His eyes stayed on Lena with the steady warmth of a lighthouse in the dark. Kathy glanced back occasionally. Each time Charles simply nodded, calm and reassuring, as if silently reminding her, she's okay, she's in good hands. They stopped at a wooden cart selling ice cream, the vendor laughing at how cold weather never stopped children from wanting sweets. Kathy bent down. "What flavor do you like, sweetheart?" "Vanilla," Lena said, voice shy. "With sprinkles, please." "Vanilla it is." Kathy smiled, handing over a crisp bill before turning to Lena again. "So tell me something about you." Lena's cheeks puffed out as she licked her cone. "Papa makes toys out of wood." He made me a rocking horse and a dragon. A dragon, Kathy laughed, genuinely surprised. Yep, it does not breathe fire, but it guards my bed. Lena giggled. And Papa tells me stories every night, but he's not good at princess stuff. He doesn't know how to do princess hair. Kathy's laughter rose like a bell. Well, maybe I could try someday. I've read a lot of fairy tales. Really? Lena's eyes lit up. Like Cinderella, Rapunzel. Even the little Match Girl. Kathy nodded. I love Match Girl, Lena whispered, more solemn now, but she was cold. Kathy paused. She looked down at the child and gently brushed snowflakes from her coat hood. Then let's make today warm, okay? Lena nodded. They walked past market stalls filled with gingerbread and handmade scarves. Kathy bought her a small snow globe, a tiny town that swirled with glitter when shaken. Lena held it to her chest like treasure. Charles watched from the edge of the path, arms folded loosely, his breath forming soft clouds in the winter air. When Lena turned back to look for him, he smiled and gave her a quiet wave. She smiled in return before skipping back to Kathy. And just like that, the invisible thread between all three of them grew tighter. They took a selfie together in front of a large snowman. Kathy crouched to Lena's level cheek to cheek, and for a brief second she forgot the boardrooms, the charts, the years of silence echoing through a penthouse high above the city. Then came the moment. In the heart of the park stood a giant Christmas tree, glowing with thousands of golden lights, each bulb dancing like tiny stars. Kathy knelt beside Lena, helping her reach for a hanging ornament shaped like a bell. Lena hesitated, then leaned in close and whispered, "You're warm, like I always imagined Mama would be." The world went quiet. Kathy froze, not from the cold, but from the weight of that single soft truth. Something deep inside her cracked open a place she had sealed long ago with resignation and grief. She had once dreamed of a child. She had imagined lullabies, messy kitchens, sleepy hugs at bedtime. But life and its cruel twists had told her she was not meant for that. And yet here was this little girl, not hers, not planned, saying words she had longed to hear from no one in particular, and now from the one heart that seemed to matter most. Kathy wrapped her arms around Lena and held her close. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me be your mama today." Behind them, Charles approached slowly, sensing the moment, but not disturbing it. He sat on the bench beside them, snow gently collecting on his sleeves. Kathy turned her voice low and full. "You've raised a little angel." Charles gave a small smile, eyes on Lena. "She raised me first." They sat in silence for a while, sipping hot cocoa from a nearby vendor. The cup warmed Kathy's hands, but it was the presence of the little girl on her lap and the quiet man beside her that warmed something far deeper. For the first time in years, Kathy felt not powerful, not accomplished, but present and real. The bus hissed softly as it pulled into the snowy lane. Kathy stood beside the small bench near the stop, her hands deep in her coat pockets, watching Lena hold Charles's hand tightly. "I had fun today," Lena beamed, looking up at her. "You're the nicest mom I ever had, even if just for now." Kathy smiled, her heart aching with a strange warmth. She crouched to Lena's level and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for letting me be." As Charles prepared to step onto the bus with Lena, Kathy hesitated. Her voice was quieter than usual, uncertain, almost shy. "Would it be okay if I saw her again?" Charles paused, glancing at Lena, who was already tugging at his sleeve with pleading eyes. His face softened. "If it makes her smile, I'll never say no." 3 days later, they found themselves standing in front of a tall townhouse at the edge of the city, modern glass, framed far removed from the worn-down apartment Charles and Lena called home. He adjusted his flannel collar awkwardly, shifting his weight, as Kathy opened the door. "Come in," she said gently. "You're not guests. You're invited." The inside was pristine but not cold. Soft lighting, wooden floors, a scent of cinnamon, and something warm in the oven. Lena clapped her hands in delight. "It smells like cookies." Kathy laughed and led her to the kitchen. "That's because we're making some." Charles stood at the threshold, unsure. Everything was too clean, too quiet, too different. But then he saw Lena, her tiny hands inside a mixing bowl, flour dusting her nose, and his shoulders relaxed. Kathy offered him coffee, not espresso, or imported blends, just regular coffee in a plain mug. "I hope this is okay." He took it, nodding. "Perfect." Each visit became more natural. Kathy never tried to impress, only to connect. She let Lena decorate cookies, draw on her office whiteboard, and even climb into her lap during meetings over Zoom. And Charles, though still reserved, began to talk more about carpentry, about books, about the things he loved, before his world became solely about diapers and bills. One evening, after Lena had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a teddy bear Kathy had found in the attic, Charles stepped onto the balcony. The city lights blinked in the distance like faraway stars. Kathy joined him, handing him a soft blanket. "She's a beautiful child," she said softly. "She's everything," Charles replied, eyes still on the horizon. They stood in silence for a while. Then Kathy turned, her voice unsure. "She's not your daughter, is she?" Charles didn't answer immediately. He looked down, fingers tightening around the cup in his hands. "No, not by blood." Kathy watched him carefully. He looked back at her, his voice steady, but thick with meaning, but by every heartbeat. That sentence hung in the air between them like something sacred. Kathy didn't speak. She didn't need to. She only reached out and gently touched his hand the first time. No words, just the quiet acknowledgement of a truth both of them had started to feel. They were not just visitors in each other's lives anymore. Something was changing, something real. Snow had fallen thick that night. It was the kind that muffled every sound, blanketing the world in stillness. Charles had just come home from a late shift fixing a broken porch when he saw it. A small wicker basket sitting quietly at his doorstep. He froze. Inside was a baby Tiny, wrapped in a frayed pink blanket, with a bear stitched onto the corner. She had no name tag, no letter, no sign of who had left her, only a single sheet of lined paper, the ink smudged slightly by snowflakes. "Please don't hate her." He stood there for minutes, unmoving, staring into the infant's eyes. They were wide-open blue, like frost, and unblinking. Charles did not know how to hold a baby. He had never changed a diaper, never warmed a bottle. But something about that gaze, calm and haunting, made walking away impossible. He took her in. That night and many after were a blur of crying, pacing, Googling how to sterilize bottles at 3:00 a.m., and sleeping in chairs. He sold most of what little he had, left his full-time job at the hardware store, started picking up odd jobs, fixing gutters, patching walls, mowing lawns, just enough to pay rent and buy formula. But she never lacked love. Every night, he read her fairy tales until she drifted off, holding his finger like it was the only anchor she had. When she cried, he hummed old songs he barely remembered. And when she took her first steps, he cried harder than she did when she fell. He named her Lena. Not because it meant anything, just because it felt like hope. Sitting across from him now, Kathy listened in silence. They were in her kitchen, Lena fast asleep upstairs. A quiet warmth from the stove made the room feel smaller, more intimate. Charles spoke plainly, as if sharing a memory, with no need for embellishment. "I was scared out of my mind," he admitted. "But I couldn't leave her there. I just couldn't." Kathy whispered, "Why didn't you call child services?" Charles smiled faintly, though his eyes didn't. "Because I wasn't her best option, just the only one who didn't walk away." The room went still. Kathy stared at him, her mouth slightly parted, but no words came. Her fingers curled around the edge of her cup. Then, almost involuntarily, she said, "When I was 27, I thought I was going to be a mother." Charles looked up. She continued, her voice low, steady. "I was in love, or I thought I was. He said he wanted a future, said all the right things." She paused, swallowed. "We heard the heartbeat at 12 weeks. I cried. I had never felt joy like that. But at week 16, I had a complication. Emergency room, cold hands. And later a doctor with soft eyes told me it might be difficult, almost impossible," he said, to carry again. Charles said nothing. He only listened. Kathy kept her gaze on the dark surface of her tea. He left, said it was too much, said I should focus on healing. She gave a short, humorless laugh. What he meant was, he didn't want the weight of loving someone who could not give him a child. There was silence again, not uncomfortable but deep, like two people finally showing their scars. "I never really cried," Kathy said, finally looking up. Because Kathy Bennett doesn't cry. Not in boardrooms, not in hospitals, not even in the dark. Charles studied her. Her expression was composed, elegant, but her eyes were breaking open, she added quietly. "It's not that I'm alone. It's that no one ever stays long enough to see the parts of me I try to hide." And there in that kitchen, surrounded by snow and the ticking of a distant clock, something shifted. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't say anything grand. He just looked at her with eyes that didn't pity, didn't question, only understood. And for the first time in a long, long while, Kathy didn't feel like she had to be strong. She simply had to be. The days blurred gently into each other, and something in the Bennett household began to shift, not in grand gestures or spoken promises, but in the smallest of routines. Kathy had started teaching Lena to write. They used a chalkboard in the sunroom, where light poured in every afternoon, and Lena's giggles echoed off the glass walls. The little girl would hold the chalk with fierce concentration, tongue poking out slightly as she scrolled big, clumsy letters. Amy read aloud one day, her voice soft with wonder. "Mama." Lena grinned. "That's you." Kathy blinked, taken off guard. Then she smiled, though it trembled slightly. "Yes, I guess it is." Down the hall, Charles had heard the exchange. He did not interrupt. He simply leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a quiet storm of emotions passing through his gaze. Later that evening, while washing dishes, Charles watched as Lena climbed onto Kathy's lap and asked for a bedtime story. It was a routine that used to belong solely to him. He dried his hands slowly, heart heavier than he liked to admit. Kathy was careful. She never overstepped. She always glanced toward Charles, seeking unspoken permission before holding Lena's hand too long or kissing her forehead. But feelings did not ask for permission. She had fallen into a rhythm with Lena, and without meaning to, she had fallen into a rhythm with Charles too. He was nothing like the men from her world. No expensive cufflinks, no corporate arrogance, just a man who could build a swing from nothing, who remembered how Lena liked her oatmeal, who fixed a leaky faucet without making it a performance. And he was quiet, but fiercely kind. Still, Kathy could feel the weight of something unspoken growing heavier between them. It wasn't the A. The breaking point came on a cool Saturday afternoon. Kathy had taken Lena out to the park while Charles stayed behind to finish repairing a shelf in the garage. They had laughed through a puppet show, shared ice cream, and picked daisies on a hillside near the duck pond. They were lying on the grass when Lena suddenly turned her head and asked, "Mama Kathy?" Kathy turned, brushing a lock of blonde hair from the child's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart." Lena's eyes were wide, honest. "If I already have Mama Kathy, then do I still need Daddy?" Time stopped. Kathy froze, every muscle locking into place. Her breath caught. Her heart thudded too loud in her chest. She opened her mouth, closed it. Finally, she managed, "You will always need your daddy, Lena. He's your home." Lena nodded, satisfied, and returned to plucking petals from a flower. But Kathy could not shake the question. That night, she did not come in for dinner. She left a message saying something had come up. She needed space. Charles read it twice, then sat at the kitchen table long after Lena had fallen asleep. Kathy sat alone in her car, parked just a block from her apartment, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on nothing. She had thought the hardest part of letting someone in would be fear, but it was not. It was guilt. What if the love she was beginning to feel for Lena was a thief in disguise? What if every smile, every bedtime kiss was slowly stealing something from Charles, something she had no right to take? And what if her feelings for Charles were not as one-sided as she had tried to believe? That thought scared her more than any boardroom failure ever had. She whispered into the silence, "I did not mean to take her from you." But the silence did not answer. It only asked one thing. What will you do with this love now that it is real? And for the first time in years, Kathy Bennett did not have an answer. Kathy had disappeared. Not in a dramatic storming out sort of way. She simply stopped calling, stopped texting. No more visits, no more shared dinners or chalkboard lessons, just silence. Charles noticed it immediately. He did not ask questions. He did not speak of it to Lena, who asked every day, "Is Mama Kathy coming over?" He would just smile, gently brush her hair back and say, "Maybe tomorrow." But the tomorrows stretched on, and so Charles poured himself into being everything Lena needed. He cooked her favorite soups, read her 3 stories instead of 1, carved her a new toy bunny from soft pine wood. He smiled wider, laughed louder. But at night, when she was asleep, he would sit alone at the kitchen table, hands folded tight, and wonder what he did wrong. Then came the storm. It started with a cough, just a light tickle in Lena's chest. By bedtime, her forehead burned with fever. Charles stayed up with her all night, holding her little body against his chest, whispering lullabies, even as panic settled deep in his bones. By morning, her fever had worsened. Her lips were dry, her skin clammy. Outside, the snow fell hard, thick, and blinding. He bundled her up, wrapped her in every warm piece of clothing they owned, and carried her on foot through the icy wind to the nearest urgent care center. Inside, the waiting room was empty. A nurse took one look at Lena and rushed them in. But after a dose of medication and hours of waiting, her fever barely budged. Charles sat beside the hospital bed, his hands shaking. Lena whimpered in her sleep, her small face flushed and restless. His phone was in his hand before he even realized it. He hesitated, then pressed her name. It only rang once. 20 minutes later, Kathy pushed open the hospital door, her coat still dusted with snow. She did not speak. She simply walked straight to Lena's bedside and knelt. Charles looked up at her. He had not seen her in weeks, and still there she was. "Her fever won't go down," he said, voice barely audible. "I know," Kathy replied. She took Lena's tiny hand into her own and pressed a cool cloth to the girl's forehead. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Mama's here." Charles turned away for a moment, his chest tight. For the next few hours they stayed there together. Kathy refused to leave Lena's side. She hummed lullabies. She whispered comfort. And when Lena finally calmed, drifting into a deeper, quieter sleep, her small body curled into Kathy's lap like it belonged there. Charles stood a few steps away watching them. He had never seen Lena look so peaceful, not since the day she was left on his doorstep. He stepped closer slowly, then sat beside them. Lena's head rested against Kathy's shoulder. Kathy glanced up at him, and in that moment, the exhaustion in both their eyes faded. "I was afraid she'd love you more," Charles said quietly, his voice rough. Kathy stared at him, her own breath catching. "But now," he continued, "I know. Maybe she needs us both." Kathy reached for his hand. She did not need words. Her fingers said everything as they curled tightly around his. That night, in the soft hum of the hospital's quiet corridors, something healed between them. Not everything, not yet, but enough. And for the first time in weeks, neither of them felt alone. 1 year later, snow blanketed the small hilltop cottage in soft, glistening white. The air was crisp, the trees whispered in silence, and the chimney puffed a steady trail of smoke into the winter sky. It was nothing like Kathy's former life in the glass penthouse towering above the city. A world of cold steel, gleaming surfaces, and polished solitude. That life had been defined by power, precision, and deadline. But this home, this little cabin of pine and warmth, was built on quiet joys. Its wooden beams held laughter in their grain. Its walls echoed bedtime stories, not boardroom commands. Windows fogged from simmering soup. The scent of cinnamon lingered in every room, and shelves overflowed with Lena's drawings and handmade wooden toys. Inside, Kathy hummed softly as she stirred a bubbling pot of stew. Her golden hair, once always perfectly coiffed, was now tied in a messy bun with flour on her cheek and warmth in her eyes. Charles stood beside her at the kitchen counter, carefully carving the final details into a miniature rocking horse. It was for a little boy at the shelter, their newest initiative through the nonprofit they founded together. Their hands moved in quiet rhythm, the kind shared by people who no longer needed words to understand each other. Their movements were simple, but their hearts beat with the same quiet certainty. Lena, now 4, and bursting with imagination, dashed into the kitchen with glitter in her curls and paint on her cheeks, waving a crayon drawing in the air like it was a treasure map. "Mama, Papa, look what I made," she squealed. "It's our house with stars on the roof. That means it's magic." Kathy knelt, catching her breath from laughter, and pulled Lena close. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. And you know what? I think you're right. It is magic." Charles leaned in, brushing a speck of glitter off Lena's nose with a chuckle. "Definitely our best Christmas yet." They had called their foundation One More Day, a name born from a time when one day of kindness had rewritten the future for 3 strangers. Now it served dozens of single parents and children, giving them meals, toys, shelter, and most of all, hope. Because both Kathy and Charles knew how far one small act could reach when given with love. Later that evening, after a simple dinner and stories by the crackling fireplace, Kathy stepped outside to feel the snow on her skin. The night was still. Snowflakes drifted down like blessings. Behind her, the soft amber lights of the cottage cast a golden hue across the snow-covered ground. She inhaled the cold air, crisp with pine, and felt peace in her bones. Charles came out a moment later, wrapping a wool scarf around her shoulders with a quiet gentleness. "Still adjusting to country life?" he asked, his voice low, amused. Kathy smiled, her eyes on the starlit sky. "I've burned 5 loaves of bread, ruined a birdhouse, and managed to get glue stuck in my eyelashes. But I've never been happier." He smiled, then reached into the pocket of his coat. "I have something for you." She turned toward him, curious, then froze. He held out a small wooden box. It was handcrafted smooth, and bore the faint scent of cherry wood. Inside, resting in dark velvet, was a ring carved from the same wood. There was no diamond, no gold, just a circle of care shaped by his hands and his heart. Kathy's breath caught her eyes, lifted to meet his steady kind and full of quiet hope. Charles knelt on one knee in the snow. The cold did not matter. The moment was warm. "You're not the miracle I asked for," he said softly. "You're the miracle I didn't know I needed." His voice was roughened by emotion, his words simple but true. "Will you be my wife?" Kathy dropped to her knees too, the snow soaking through her jeans. She wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing through tears. "Yes," she whispered, her voice shaking with joy. "Let's build this life, not perfect, but ours." Inside the house, Lena peeked through the frosted window, her eyes wide with wonder. When she saw them in the snow, she squealed, "Mama said yes." The house glowed brighter than ever that night, as if the love inside spilled out through every crack and corner. And outside, in the stillness of Christmas Eve, under a sky full of stars and snow, love carved its quiet miracle. Gently, tenderly, forever. 1 year later, the town still shimmered under December's snow. But this time, Kathy Bennett was not in a boardroom. She had gracefully stepped down from her role as CEO, not in scandal or defeat, but in peace. The office lights still glowed downtown, but her heart now beat for something different. The heartbeat of a home, the laughter of a child, the warmth of love found in unlikely places. She and Charles now ran one more day full-time, a foundation that had grown roots in the community, providing aid for single parents and children, and reminding people that even one good day could change everything. Their home was a modest log cabin tucked near the forest's edge. No golden handles or marble counters, just creaking wooden floors, hand-carved furniture, and the smell of cinnamon and pine. Each corner told a story. Each scratch on the floor whispered of a life lived with meaning. Lena had started preschool. Each morning, she proudly marched in with her handmade backpack and told her teachers, "Mama reads me fairy tales every night, and Papa makes toys for my school." At pickup time, she ran into Kathy's arms shouting, "We made snowflake crowns today," before climbing into the old pickup truck had somehow kept running for 10 years. There were no fancy vacations or private jets, but there were picnics in the woods, marshmallows over bonfires, and snow angels made while giggling until their cheeks hurt. There were quiet nights, reading under blankets, and noisy mornings with pancakes that never quite looked like circles. And then came the anniversary, Christmas Eve. The 3 of them returned to the park, where it all began. The town square was lit up again. Families bustling, music playing, children laughing. But this time, they were no longer on the outside looking in. Kathy wore her wool coat and a scarf Lena had designed with glitter glue. Charles held a thermos of hot cocoa steam curling into the sky. And between them, holding both their hands, was Lena, now taller still in a red coat, but with eyes that sparkled brighter than the Christmas lights. They walked slowly past the same bench where Kathy once sat alone. Lena tugged both their hands. "Can we spend every day together, forever?" Charles looked at Kathy. Kathy looked at Charles. Their hands tightened around Lena's. "Forever and ever," they said in unison. Lena stopped, threw her arms around their legs, and looked up with that old soul in her eyes. "I don't have Mama," she said, then smiled. "But now I have Mama Kathy, and it's forever." Kathy knelt, tears in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, forever." They embraced as snow began to fall, soft, silent, and gentle as a promise kept. And in the quiet of the evening, with lights twinkling and music drifting in the distance, the family stood whole, complete. Not by blood, not by plan, but by choice. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we invite you to keep the warmth alive. Every soul has a story, and every story has the power to heal, inspire, and bring light to someone's darkest hour. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales that remind us of the strength in kindness, the magic in ordinary moments, and the love that finds us when we least expect it. Hit the like button if Lena's wish made you tear up, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances, found families, and Christmas miracles.